Good day, everyone. For teleSUR, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. Heads of states and high-ranking officials from 17 Caribbean and Latin American nations have arrived here in Venezuela for the 9th summit of the energy alliance Petrocaribe. According to the Venezuelan state oil company, PDVSA, the meeting is focused on pushing forward a multilateral agenda with an emphasis on integration, cooperation, and socio-economic development. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro is set to facilitate the event alongside Venezuelan Foreign Minister Delcy Rodriguez. First Vice President of Cuba, Miguel Díaz-Canel, said one of the purposes of his visit is to emphasize Cuba's support for the Maduro government in the face of destabilization attempts. Looking closer now at Petrocaribe Energy Alliance. What is it? It was founded by the late Hugo Chavez in 2005 as a way to promote regional integration in the Caribbean. The bloc provides energy at a preferential rate to the 19 members of the alliance. Venezuela's oil company has provided Petrocaribe members with more than 230 million barrels of crude since the initiative began. The organization has gone beyond just the supply of hydrocarbons, creating political and financial ties between the member states as a way to strengthen regional solidarity. Now, currently, the alliance is responsible for the carrying out of more than 85 development projects in 11 member countries. And at the same time that leaders discuss energy alliances in Caracas, a delegation from the Union of South American Nations, UNASUR, is also in the Venezuelan capital. Representatives from Ecuador, Brazil, and Colombia have arrived in Venezuela to help lower tensions between the Venezuelan opposition and the government of President Nicolás Maduro. Earlier this month, the Maduro administration successfully preempted a planned coup attempt against his democratically elected government. The head of UNASUR, Ernesto Samper, is participating in the dialogues. And in other Venezuelan news, a new report shows that over 95% of Venezuelans eat 3 times daily, despite rumors of nationwide food shortages. Released by the government, the report shows that the malnutrition rate is now less than 5%. It stood at 21% in 1998, and the government is currently working to further reduce the current percentage through the various food programs first created by former President Hugo Chavez. In what continues to be a significant development in Colombia's peace process, Colombian generals are meeting with FARC leaders in Havana, Cuba. The high-ranking military officers joined the peace talks on Thursday and are expected to provide their recommendations to end the longest war in Latin America. The conflict has killed 220,000 people and displaced millions. So far, partial agreements have been negotiated on land reform, political participation for ex-rebels, and an end to the illegal drugs trade. The meetings with the generals are scheduled to last throughout the weekend. A poll by consulting firm Buendia and Laredo shows that the support for Mexico's Institutional Revolutionary Party, led by President Enrique Peña Nieto, is rapidly declining. The party's approval ratings have dropped from 42% in November 2014 to 30% in mid-February this year. Ahead of the midterm elections in June, it seems that the scandals surrounding the president may have adverse effects on the election outcome. Some polls have now shown the president's approval rating dipping as low as 25%. And amid the slumping approval ratings, the Mexican president has found some support in the UK. During Peña Nieto's recent trip to London, UK Prime Minister David Cameron's office released a statement outlining his support for Peña Nieto's approach to human rights. Other further details of the meeting between Cameron and Peña Nieto are pending. We do know the two leaders agreed on several trade agreements, especially in the energy sector, involving the Mexican state-owned oil company Pemex. Also in Mexico, authorities have announced a series of public budget cuts, including layoffs and slashes to the country's public oil company, Pemex. Clayton Kahn now reports.
Mexico's Finance Minister Luis Videgaray confirmed in London that his government plans additional significant public spending cuts for 2016 to address lower revenues due to a drop in oil prices. In January, he announced that the cuts, the biggest in a decade, would only be implemented through 2015.
The federal public sector will carry out adjustments of $9 billion in public spending during 2015, which represents 0.7% of the gross domestic product.
The biggest casualty to the cuts is Mexico's state oil company Pemex. Historically providing Mexico with 1/3 of its revenues, the company's budget is to be slashed by $4 billion. Opposition lawmakers consider the call a forum to dismantle the public energy company.
They have wanted to kill Petróleos Mexicanos by starving it. They want to dismantle and weaken it little by little, and to hand the drilling of wells over to private companies with the plan of gradually extinguishing Petróleos Mexicanos.
Some analysts affirm that the drop of more than 50% in oil revenues will also dissuade foreign and private investment, forcing the government to redesign its economic outlook beyond 2016. In February, the director of Pemex affirmed that the company's budget cuts will result in canceling certain infrastructure projects and laying off at least 3,000 workers. Sources inside Pemex tell teleSUR that the layoffs will be more like 10,000 employees. Pemex workers are expected to protest the cuts on March 18th, marking the 77th anniversary when then-President Lázaro Cárdenas expropriated Mexico's oil from private companies. Clayton Kahn, teleSUR, Mexico City.
Chicago Public Schools have announced that Latino and Latin American studies will now be incorporated into their curriculum. The announcement was made in conjunction with the Chicago District's Latino Advisory Committee. In a press release, Chicago Public Schools stated that the curriculum will focus on the history, arts, culture, and contributions of Latinos, including the peoples of Central and South America, as well as the Caribbean. U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder has affirmed a court's decision to not bring criminal charges against the white police officer who fatally shot black unarmed teenager Michael Brown. The announcement sparked several protests. Ferguson police arrested 2 protesters on Wednesday. The law enforcement agents alleged to have asked the protesters to leave the streets without success. The new demonstrations follow the release of a report by the U.S. Justice Department which confirms the existence of racial bias within the Ferguson police force. As a result of the report, Michael Brown's family will file a civil suit against the Ferguson Police Department. The family maintains that police officer Darren Wilson exercised excessive force in killing the teenager. In the civil suit, the jury will be asked to reach a decision based on a lower burden of proof rather than just beyond a reasonable doubt. While many Indian men believe women are inviting rape, a group of Afghan men are wearing burqas in protest of women's rights. Ahead of Women's International Day on March 8th, the demonstrations associated with a group called the Afghan Peace Volunteers marched through the capital of Kabul on Thursday, wearing head-to-toe burqas. One resident said the protest was also against the recent violence against women in Afghanistan. And as we approach International Women's Day on Sunday, a feminist group in Gaza is protesting Israel's continued occupation. Our correspondent Noor Harazin now with this report.
With the presence of female Hamas leaders, the Islamic feminist movement in Gaza and the national movement to end the siege organized a rally this morning to condemn the continuation of the Egyptian-Israeli siege on the Strip. The Palestinian women protest rally started at El Mina Square and ended in the Seaport Yard, where several events began and women delivered speeches calling on the international community and Arab countries to intervene and help ease the siege of Gaza. The movement chose Gaza's seaport as the location in order to send a symbolic message that it was the ultimate Palestinian dream to have the right of freedom of movement, especially for the residents of Gaza who have been living under an Israeli siege for the last 9 years.
We are the women of Gaza, and we are sending an urgent message to the world. We have a seaport that is not working due to the Israeli occupation. Even fishers have mile limits on where they can fish. This is inhuman and illegal. We must have our rights of freedom of movement, of using our seaport, and also the reconstruction of our destroyed airport.
The port in Gaza City is currently restricted to fishers, whom Israel only allows to fish up to a maximum of 6 nautical miles from the shore. However, the Israeli naval boats violate the Palestinian-Israeli truce on a weekly basis by attacking fishers. Gaza is the home to 1.8 million people, and its only getaway to the world not controlled by Israel is the Rafah border with Egypt, which has been basically closed since late October. Nuharazin, teleSUR TV, Gaza.
ISIS militants have bulldozed an important archaeological site in northern Iraq, located some 30 kilometers from the ISIS stronghold of Mosul. The ancient city was once the military capital of the Assyrian Empire. Although the extent of the damage has not been assessed, reports state that statues and other artifacts have been damaged. Thus far, about 26,000 square meters of the seafloor have been searched for missing Malaysian flight MH370, and still no trace on the 239 people who were on board. About $18 million have been spent to search a 60,000 square kilometer priority zone. It remains unknown how long the search will last without results. The mission is scheduled to end in May, but that may change depending on the findings within the priority zone.
Lost contact with Subang Air.
An Indian documentary detailing the words of a convicted rapist and murderer have put a global spotlight on women's rights. A study by a Bangalore-based nonprofit Children's Movement for Civic Awareness reveals that Indian college students believe that some women invite rape. Of the over 10,000 students interviewed, almost 60% of boys believe that women instigate rape by dressing provocatively. 50% of women surveyed shared that same view. The survey highlights the prevalent gender biases that still exist in India. And that documentary continues to court controversy. India's Ministry of Information and Broadcasting has threatened the BBC for airing the documentary. The BBC responded that the film's content addresses an important global problem and that it meets the network's editorial standards. The film, which includes that interview with a gang rapist, has been debated extensively on social media, with some arguing that the film has given the rapist an unnecessary platform. In Brazil, Rio Fashion Week has been canceled for economic reasons, but the show goes on unfazed in the street. Fashion models traded the catwalk for the streets of Ipanema neighborhood in Rio de Janeiro. Models and the designers said that they were glad for the chance to showcase the creations they would have presented at next month's Fashion Week if it had gone on as planned. Friday marks what would have been the 87th birthday of the late Nobel Prize-winning author Gabriel Garcia Marquez, best known for his novels Love in the Time of Cholera and 100 Years of Solitude. Garcia Marquez was born in Colombia and raised by his storytelling grandparents. That's who he credited for inspiring his own writing style called magical realism. And to mark his 85th birthday, we leave you with one of his notable quotes. Quote, "It is not true that people stop pursuing dreams because they grow old. They grow old because they stop pursuing dreams." End quote. And that's where we ended today. Plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. For teleSUR English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day.